Hello everyone and welcome along to the Liverpool News Daily on the Blood Red channel with myself, Patrick Smith, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Liverpool.com writer James Martin. James, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Lots to talk about. The game tonight has sort of been overshadowed by FSG Takeover stuff, but football is still probably the most important thing, even if it doesn't seem like it. So I'm sure we'll dive into some of that soon.
Yeah, of course we will. The FSG Takeover is going to dominate all the talk. We'll talk about that later though, because we've got the match tonight to talk about. Liverpool against Derby County. It's the return of the Baby Reds, the team we all love to see, the fringe players getting their chance in the early stages of cup competitions. Now, James, Derby County, League One side, I think they're in 7th place at the moment. Relatively decent. It could be a tricky evening if Pep Lijnders and Jurgen Klopp do rotate to this expected younger, inexperienced side, couldn't it?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we've seen it a lot in the Klopp era. It's easy to forget after last season, where of course did the domestic cup double, and it feels like a distant memory when we were sort of crashing out at the early stages almost every year. But really, it was last year that was a departure from the norm. Liverpool would normally get through this kind of fixture. It's normally once we get to the kind of lower Premier League teams historically that maybe we've had some disappointing results. So, yeah, I think even with the young Reds that we should have enough. I mean, Derby, like you say, they're doing decently in League One. That they were in the Championship not so long ago. Of course, there was a lot of fallout there. A lot of players had to leave, had to be sold. But there's still a decent core of players there. And yeah, you wouldn't rule out an upset, but yeah, I mean, Liverpool do have a very good core of youngsters as well, and it is the Baby Reds, but it's not quite an academy team. It's quite nice. That's why I like these sort of games in the domestic cup. It's a chance to kind of integrate some of these players a little bit more with a kind of blend of them and the senior players. So it's not just another kind of Papa John's trophy in that respect. It's not just one where a full-on academy team turns up and gets battered by a group of senior players, because that's not really particularly useful to anyone. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a good chance for a few of the most promising prospects to test themselves at a higher level. But yeah, I mean, I'm still fairly confident Liverpool will be able to get a win.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of years for Derby County. I mean, their financial troubles have been well documented, and they seem to be steadying the ship now, so fair play to them for that. But upsets can happen, of course. We saw Everton last night get knocked out 4-1 by Bournemouth. I'm not sure how much of an upset that is, but it's nice seeing Everton be knocked out of a competition before Liverpool start playing in it. But anyway, let's move on to the team. You mentioned there, it's not quite going to be an academy side, but there are some new faces we hopefully are going to see. I think the main one that everyone's most interested in is Calvin Ramsay. We've not really seen him play for Liverpool yet. Are you excited to see him potentially tonight, James?
Yeah, definitely. It seems fairly nailed on, barring any setbacks. This seems like exactly the sort of game where he'll finally be able to get a proper run out. It's where we've seen the likes of Nico Williams and Conor Bradley in the past. So it's very much kind of the Liverpool template to bring in their flavour of the month young right back in these sort of games to give Trent a rest and, test their mettle, if you like. But yeah, more intrigue over Ramsey because, like you say, none of us have really seen him. He came with a big reputation from Aberdeen. He was fairly pricey as well. Not in terms of Liverpool's usual transfer outlay, but in terms of buying from the Scottish League. You maybe wouldn't expect to have forked out quite that much, and that's sort of testament to the reputation he'd built up for himself at a very young age, still a teenager. And yeah, he's had a lot of stylistic comparisons to Trent, which is always going to be exciting. I mean, maybe it was more exciting in pre-season than now when Trent's had his struggles. And if someone said he's just like Trent, maybe there'd be a few more question marks or maybe we'd want someone quite like Trent, but with a bit more of a defensive nous. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, the fact remains he's been one of Liverpool's best playmakers for 4 or 5 years. So if Liverpool have managed to unearth a gem who plays even vaguely similarly to him, then yeah, it's still very much the case that they'll have done well. So yeah, it'll be good to get a chance to sort of assess those claims in a Liverpool shirt rather than just YouTube compilations of Aberdeen. So yeah, that's probably what I'd be most excited about as well in terms of the young players who could potentially feature.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, I've seen those montages made of his Aberdeen days. He does look like he has a similar style to Trent. Even technically, it's really strange, actually, the comparisons you can draw. So let's hope Liverpool can dominate the ball tonight and potentially let him display his passing range, because it seems to be one of the main reasons they signed him. I mean, you don't pay a fee, as you said, for a young Scottish player without them being good enough. And Liverpool's recruitment rarely get it wrong, do they? Well, let's move on now. up into the midfield. It's been an area that we've talked about on pretty much every podcast I've done on Blood Red Channel this year. Stefan Bajcetic, young midfielder, Spanish of Serbian descent as well, I believe. Really exciting player. Pep Lijnders spoke about him in the press conference yesterday. I think he called him a presence. I think he mentioned how you get presents sometimes from the academy every once in a while. Is Stefan Bajcetic one of those, do you think, James?
Well, yeah, I hope so. I've been impressed every time I've seen him. I'm not as regular a watcher of the academy as maybe Matt or Ben, who we sometimes have on here. So you'll have to ask them. But in terms of what we've seen in the actual first team, obviously it's only really been cameos plus pre-season. But yeah, he looked really promising on all of those occasions. He's after pre-season, I was sort of thinking, that he's probably going to be the next kind of Tyler Morton, if you like, who had a similar one a couple of seasons ago, didn't he? Where he looked good in pre-season and then found himself thrust in on a few occasions. I think he had a tough time against Spurs, and then we maybe saw him a little bit less. He's been managed a bit more carefully since then. But yeah, it's testament to the academy that there's a fairly steady conveyor belt of players who can, at least in a buy-in, step in and do a job in the first team. First there was Morton. I think Bajcetic is very much in the same mould. I mean, he's not let the club down yet. He's appeared in Europe a couple of times. I think he's come on maybe once in the league, but he's been on the bench a lot anyway. And yeah, I like the look of him. He has a chance to prove himself. It's interesting because he's played a lot of different positions. For the first team, he's come in essentially as a defensive midfielder when he's featured. And that kind of makes sense, given that's where Liverpool lack the most depth. That's probably where he'll see his opportunity to pick up a reasonable amount of minutes in the second half of the season. Is if he can make his case here to be the sort of Fabinho understudy, then maybe that's a way where he can sort of muscle his way in. But equally, I think he's played at centre-back before. He can play further forward as well. He's still so young, and with that comes the versatility and the fact that his best position hasn't necessarily been discovered yet. So it'll be interesting to see him, but also interesting to see exactly where he plays. I mean, like I say, I'd probably prefer him in the number 6 role because I like the look of him there, and that's where we could do with an extra body. But if he plays in something which he considers to be more of his favoured position, then it'll be interesting to get a look at that as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. When he's played at centre half, as you mentioned there, I think that physicality and defensive robustness could be so important in Liverpool midfield because they've been out-battled in so many matches this year. If he could perhaps come in and do a job, you never know, he might even get a run in the team with Fabinho's form. If it, let's hope not, declines even more, he could see his minutes there. So it's a really exciting time for him, and hopefully he goes well tonight. Well, someone else, James, who's returning is Kelleher. I think he hasn't played since the League Cup final. I might be wrong on that, correct me if I am. But it's good to see him back in a Liverpool shirt, and Anfield will give him a very good reception, I'm sure.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. It's been a while since we've seen him. Couldn't even see him in pre-season, of course, because he picked up that injury. He's bound to get a good reception. Like you say, he was the hero last season. Special game for him. This is the competition where he's guaranteed starts. I think he got a couple in the FA Cup last season before the properly tough fixtures kicked in, and then it was back to Alisson. So yeah, this is where he knows he's getting games for Liverpool, and obviously he's going to want to get as many of those as possible. So yeah, of everyone who plays tonight, he'll probably have the biggest incentive to make sure it's a win, to make sure he gets another game this season. But yeah, I really like him. It's a tricky gig because Alisson is exceptional. No one's gonna oust him from the team, for years to come even. And whether Kelleher wants to wait around that long, only he'll know that. It's tricky as well because you look at the Ireland national team. You've got Bazunu now, sort of regular for Southampton. So there's only so long that Kelleher's going to be able to keep scrapping for that shirt without playing first team football somewhere, you'd have thought. But as long as Liverpool can hold on to him, they've got. Well, I mean, it's what Klopp was saying after that League Cup final. He's got, for the way Liverpool play, he's the best number 2 in the world, and I think that's fair. I mean, because he has that kind of profile of a Liverpool goalkeeper. He's good with his feet. He's brave. He sweeps. I think, if anything, when I watch him, he seems to be an even more aggressive sweeper than Alisson. He seems to be out of his box half the time. And yeah,
I recall the Cardiff game in the FA Cup last year. I think he made a few aggressive pushes out, didn't he?
Yeah, but they always seem to work. He seems to judge them pretty much to perfection. I really enjoy watching him, which is not something you actually say too often about a goalkeeper. You actually enjoy watching them. But yeah, I always look forward to the Kelleher cameos, and hopefully the first of a few this season.
Yeah, well, certainly exciting times. Let's hope Kelleher goes well tonight as well. It's so exciting to see all these players coming back to play for Liverpool. It's like supporting a little second team of sorts. Well, let's move away from the football now, anyway, James. As someone says in the comments here, wait, do we play football? The past couple of days have been a blur, and I could not agree more. I think we'd all forgotten the game this week. But yeah, I mean, James, there's plenty of rumours around the takeover conversation. I mean, they are rumours at this stage. Nothing is concrete. The Dubai Crown Prince has been mentioned, with Liverpool travelling there. Perhaps there's a connection there. But more interestingly, James, let's talk about Conor McGregor. I mean, it's probably ironic, but he's throwing his hat in the ring, seemingly. Can you imagine Liverpool being owned by Conor McGregor?
No, absolutely not. It would, yeah, it's a fairly nightmare scenario for me. He's a complete maverick, isn't he? And he's had his fair share of controversies as well. So, maybe not quite a sports washing project, but still not necessarily someone you'd be thrilled to have at the helm of the club. It would just raise a lot of questions. But I think the biggest question, or at least the biggest barrier, is does he have the funds? And surely the answer to that is no. I mean, no one knows his fortune for sure. Maybe he's a lot richer than anyone realised, but the numbers getting thrown around to just buy Liverpool, and then bear in mind you're still going to have to funnel money into it just to buy it alone. As much as 4 billion has been mentioned in certain quarters, ESPN I think suggested that they'd heard that from various valuations, but yeah, at least 3 billion, which is it. Yeah, I mean, it's how do you even talk about money like that? It's crazy, and I don't think MMA gets you that sort of money. I don't think Conor McGregor's whiskey brand gets him that sort of money either. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it seems like a non-starter for many, many reasons.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, though. It would be very funny seeing him strutting around in the director's box. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you, James Martin, for joining me. Thank you to all of you as well for watching along at home. We've got plenty of content going out today. Be sure to stick around on Liverpool.com to see the brilliant articles from our journalists like James, of course, the Liverpool Echo website and socials, and of course, right here on the Blood Red channel as I bring you all the build-up to Liverpool against Derby in the League Cup and all the reaction, including Pep Blinders or potentially Jurgen Klopp's press conference. So make sure you're subscribed and sticking around with us here. But for now, we'll catch you later, and thank you for joining us.